Hey there, my name is Alex, I'm the Silver Mont, and in this video we're going to be talking about FromSoft's PvP situation. Again. A few weeks back, I put out a video talking about my perceived issues with FromSoft's PvP. I wasn't really expecting too much discussion on the matter, frankly. I hoped for it, but I didn't anticipate it. Either way, people had a lot to say, and I feel like it warranted a follow-up video to specifically discuss a very closely related topic. How can the PvP be improved? Of course, Duskblood still isn't out. In fact, we don't know anything more now than we did when I made that video, and I actually made that video a while ago and then just released it recently. It's very possible that game, Duskbloods, will make some big changes that might bleed over to future titles, which is often how FromSoft do it. We never got a Bloodborne 2, but aspects of Bloodborne bled into the future games. For example, same with Shadows Die Twice, and so on. And Duskbloods, of course, is the Nintendo-exclusive PvPvE focused title, with an emphasis on PvP compared to the other games that FromSoft have made recently. To briefly touch on the last video, the comments from you guys can largely be divided into three camps, if I generalize a bit. But loosely speaking, the feedback came in three forms. 1. People who do not wish to engage in PvP in any way, shape, or form. People who find invasions entirely disagreeable would rather play these games offline completely. And while some people were talking about the co-op, most of this group would rather treat these games as a wholly offline experience. The second group of people either enjoy or have enjoyed PvP in the past, with the overwhelming consensus amidst these comments, by the way, not the whole community, just so that's clear, because people really like putting words into my mouth. But the consensus there was that there just isn't anything quite like it. They acknowledge the problems, and they find it frustrating at times, but they also realize there is nothing quite like the invasion mechanic in other games. There's a lot of PvP games around, but Souls offers something unique, an experience they can't get elsewhere. And as mentioned, most of these people acknowledge the flaws that these games have, whether they are a newbie or a veteran bee. The third group, the final group, are the people who are taking PvP so seriously that any slight, perceived or otherwise, against it sends them up the wall in a fit of rage, launching personal attacks against people who dare offer up the very extreme criticisms that I had, such as when I claimed that they haven't really been doing anything to evolve PvP in these games in the last 10 years and have in fact removed features. That was met with a lot of vitriol and counters such as, but you can jump now. That is correct, you can jump in Elden Ring. So I must admit, I was wrong. They have added very important features to evolve PvP, such as being able to jump. And because I was wrong, I will be momentarily launching myself into the sun. But let's finish this video first. Most of the feedback from this thankfully small group of people was, you just suck at PvP, or you don't understand the fundamentals. Or, and this was brought up a few times, do more research. Yeah, do more research. Only those who have put in 10,000 hours into Elden Ring are allowed to criticize it. In short, they relied on three things in their arguments: ad hominem, no true Scotsman fallacy, and nothing else. Thankfully though, as mentioned, this was a minority, a very sparse few amidst a sea of reasonable people who, even if they disagreed with me, they were able to present their arguments like adults. But it's also the easiest group to address, so we'll do that first to get out of the way. Now, allow me to demonstrate for you the depth of my knowledge when it comes to PvP mechanics. Indeed, according to these people, I propped myself up as a PvP expert. Now, I don't remember ever saying that, and I in fact rewatched the video to see, and you know it's funny because I never actually did say in that video that I was a PvP expert, but claims in YouTube comments must be true, so factually I am now a PvP expert. And you know, the reason my name's in the credits for Dark Souls 2 isn't just because of that shield. No. You see, I played a very, very important part in the formation of that game's fundamental PvP meta, one that nobody has mastered or even discovered. Ergo, feeble cursed one, look upon my secret Dark Souls 2 movement tech. We call this the Silver Mont skedaddle. Movement text such as this enhances your abilities in PvP by at least 500%, so make sure you study it, alright? And with that out of the way and my position as PvP master and god established, let's move on to the other two groups, as those are the ones actually worth discussing. First up, if you've forgotten, the group of people who do not want PvP in these games. They do not want to participate at all. I'm not sure if you could include me in this group or not, to be honest. How to put it? The state of PvP after 15 plus years in this franchise has me extremely disinterested currently. So FromSoft came out and said, Elden Ring 2, Dark Souls 4 has no PvP. I'd be like, okay. But at the same time, if they came out with a video featuring how the PvP is now going to be the most awesome thing ever, I'd be like, okay, yeah. But I get the arguments these people have. I'm going to try and look at all the arguments from all the different perspectives in as unbiased and rounded a way as I can. So ultimately, invasions have been a staple of this franchise, going back to the beginning, and I do not fundamentally agree they should be removed. In their current state, I think they are miserable. But obviously a lot of people still enjoy them. I do not enjoy them. You might enjoy them. You are allowed to enjoy them. Not sure why people think I'm trying to stop people from enjoying them. But it is a unique part of these games, and it is a draw for some people for the franchise. If you do not want to participate in PvP, to some extent it is opt-in. First up, the latest entries since Dark Souls 3 and onwards, I believe, they all have offline modes. Generally speaking, you only open yourself up to invasions if you are doing co-op. Does this mean co-op should be forced into PvP? Risk and reward, right? That's usually what people say. If you want to make the game easier for yourself by summoning help, you also run the risk of an invasion. Maybe, but we'll talk more on that in a moment. I'm not sure how I feel about the idea of a no invasions mode. I'm strongly of the belief that these games do not need difficulties that are tweaked via menus and toggles. One difficulty, baseline, where players modify it through their own actions, is one of the best gameplay design features of Dark Souls and Elden Ring. And yes, you can argue that going into a menu and swapping it to easy mode is your own actions too. But what I'm referring to is the more organic method. Is a boss too hard for you? Find a better weapon. Upgrade your items, or indeed summon another player for the boss. Or go fight another boss. Your options are vast, and it is far more organic than simply pick easy mode, now boss is the same but does 50% less damage. Some people like that, and I understand it. Dragon Age Veilguard allows you to toggle very individual parts of the difficulty, like the parry timing, damage taken, damage received. Actually, damage taken and damage received are the same things. Damage dealt, damage received. That's an interesting way to do it, but I don't think that would be right for Dark Souls. See, Elden Ring is now a huge franchise. Before that, Souls was relatively niche in terms of sales, but now, no, it's in the AAA space. Tens of millions of copies sold. You're gonna attract all sorts of players, including those who just want to experience the world, or the story, or whatever. Now, to some extent, I'm not going to judge you however you want to play these games. If you want to play it solely just to walk around the world, okay, that's fine. If you want to play it solely for the PvP, that's fine. I do find that a bit strange from my perspective, but you're allowed to do it. I'm not going to say you need to stop doing that. And I do believe, to some extent, all of these varied players who all want something different from the game, they can be catered to without difficulty options, you know, like easy, normal, hard. I don't think the solution is a no PvP option, although that does exist as mentioned in the form of offline mode. And if you're playing these games in offline mode, again, that is fine. I do think, to some extent, you are playing in a way that the developers don't intend for. Again, don't take that the wrong way. I'm not saying you need to go online, but a big part of the experience is from the online, from seeing player ghosts, player messages, and all that. But on that same note, are a lot of player messages just stupid memes like Fortnite? Yes, they are. And does it ruin your experience by playing offline? No, not at all. All I'm saying is that it's not the intended way, because the intended way, I believe, is online. That's not necessarily a good or a bad thing, because players often find ways to experience games that the developers did not intend for or expect, but then oftentimes they will cater for that in future entries, such as putting in an offline mode here. Back when Demon's Souls and Dark Souls came out, I'm 90% sure the developers didn't intend for people to play the whole game from start to finish in co-op with a friend, but look how popular that is now, and they have catered for it to some extent. And how about those players who want to play through the whole game in co-op? If you haven't done that with Elden Ring, I'll tell you it's an incredible way to play the game. I've played through Elden Ring many times, on the normal game, the normal standard version, and on the seamless co-op version with my friends, and they are distinct in some ways, and it's still a good game either way, but seamless co-op is the perfect way to play the game for me. If you are just summoning players for a boss that you can't beat, your chances of being invaded are quite slim, because a lot of the time you'll be standing at the gate, so you get your summons, you go through the gate, the invade is not an issue. If you're playing through the whole game, yeah, you will be invaded by design, and you will have to deal with invaders a lot more. Should something be done to cater for these players? Maybe, maybe not. As people pointed out, I am not the arbiter of game design, and I never claim to be. That is ultimately something the designers have to consider, because they are the arbiters of the game design. Because as I mentioned earlier, they never intended for people to do these full co-op playthroughs. But a lot of people do, because it's just a real damn fun. Now keep in mind, there is, so far as I'm aware, no perfect solution, but we can certainly consider a few options. First up, let's just assume that Elden Ring 2 has seamless co-op built in. Will it happen? Probably not, but for the sake of argument, let's say they allow you to play the whole game from start to finish with other players if you want to. And if you don't know how seamless co-op works, it's a mod for Elden Ring, on PC obviously, where if you download the mod and you launch the game, it has a completely different save file and online interface. You can't play with people who are playing the normal version of the game, you can only be paired with people who also are on the mod. So let's say you and I want to play together in seamless co-op. I load up the game and I set a password. You set that password as well and you join me and you're in my world. If you die, then you respawn at a bonfire. If it's in a boss, you go into a spectator mode. There's no need to resummon for the most part. We explore the whole world, we go into dungeons, we clear the dungeon, you're still there, we leave the dungeon, we teleport around, we do everything. Sometimes it gets a bit buggy with quests and stuff, but overall, it's an amazing way to play the game. You can enable invasions, you can also have them just turned off, you can also tweak things like how much health and stagger resistance the bosses have. For example, you can make it so the bosses have 50% more health per player. You can make it so they have the same amount of health. You can scale it however feels right to you. So aside from the customizing of, boss health and stuff, let's assume that's how Elden Ring 2 co-op is. When you join someone, you're there until you choose to leave. Does this mean you are constantly flagged for invasion? How does one develop a game for both kinds of players? Well, to some extent, you have to look at what people want from the game. What do people want from invasions? It's easy to figure out what people want from co-op. If people are summoning, it's usually for one of three reasons. A, they want help fighting a boss. B, they want to play with their friends. C, they want to summon people to gank invaders with for PvP. But for invasions, that's a little bit more varied. Some players will say, they want the 1v1 experience, and that's these days a silly thing to expect from invasions, because 90% of the time your invasions, no matter the outcome, are not going to be a fair battle, so I don't buy that. But I do think that's kind of like a minority of people who want that from invasions. People who want 1v1s and are serious about it would either host a fight club, go to the arena equivalent, the Colosseum, or a duel area like the Iron Keep Bridge, the start of the Kiln, outside of Sully's arena, or outside of Super Mario Academy in Elden Ring, for examples. So I'm gonna gloss over that. See, someone raised an interesting point in the comments that applies here. Whilst not always the case, many invasions are insanely lopsided, with the host often being a new player or one without a PvP focused build, whereas the invader is generally, not always, optimized specifically for killing other players. Again, this is not 100% of cases, but it's a fair generalization to make. Inherently, invasions are not fair, either way. because, all the time invaders pop up, there are 3 people there waiting to batter them around the head. Notice I said invasions are not fair. I didn't say invasions are bad. They are unfair. They are chaotic. And let's be real, they probably should be. The notion of bowing to an invader and invading and bowing to a host is, to some extent, I like the sense of honour and fairness that people are trying to do. I'm very guilty of that myself. Most of the time I invade people, I wait for them to be aware of my presence and I wave or I bow, and that is a bit silly. They invaded your world. They are there for your head, either for the joy of ganking or because they are hounding for rewards. I'm not built for that sort of devious behaviour, and it's quite common for invaders to behave in a relatively honourable way. But you can't blame them for not doing that, because that is the point of invasions. It's all there in the name. Invasions. You did not consent to being invaded, other than the sense that you are playing the game and you are aware that is part of the game, and you are opening yourself up to the risk of being invaded. Moving on though, if you're invading for the thrill of it, maybe you love using your OP items to gank new players. I won't blame you for that. It is what the game is designed for to some extent. These items exist. Invasions exist. No mercy, no rules of engagement. If you're that kind of player, does the reward even matter? Or is it just the rush you presumably get when ganking someone? We have adjacent players to that, those who think of it as a challenge to overcome. I know that when I invade, I will most likely come up against a group of 3. It makes me feel good when I beat them. It makes me feel accomplished when I win despite the odds being against me. And this is a trickier proposition to design around because it's the player who does it for the love of the game, you might say. They don't need rewards, they don't need incentive, they just enjoy the unique aspects of invasions. Which, I will say once again, that is fine if you enjoy that. I used to enjoy that. I do not currently enjoy that. But let's look at it from another potential angle, the invader who is doing it to progress. Of course, Elden Ring has no covenants, no real progression either, if we're being real. That's one of the issues I have with it, and why I call it stagnant, because nothing about the PvP has really advanced since Dark Souls 2, 10 years ago, and I'm talking in features. Yes, there are more items, there are new movement techs and new abilities to discover and all that. There is a new and constantly shifting meta. But I'm talking features. In some ways, it has regressed to a more basic form, albeit a smoother one, if not perfect, as the netcode is still pretty janky. And yes, many people brought up the netcode is better now than it was in past games. The online PvP is smoother. Yes, but it's still not good enough. That's my point. Even so, let's imagine Elden Ring 2, Redaniel Boogaloo has covenants. You know how Elden Ring 1 kind of had the different factions of magic, like the Golden Order and all that? Maybe those are the covenants now, whatever. Let's say you're in the Invasion Covenant. You can offer up host ears, like in Dark Souls 3, to rank up in your covenant. It's an ongoing thing with higher ranks giving rewards. Probably mostly cosmetic ones, if you ask me. The more you hand in, the stronger becomes your glow. Maybe you even get an exclusive armor set. These are all things that have been in previous games. So I'm just drawing examples from those, but there is all manner of things you can do as rewards, right? I've played enough games, and you've probably played enough games to know that if players need to spend 1,000 hours grinding to get an exclusive title, or pet, or sunglasses, or something extremely minor to most people, they will, because people want to stand out. They want their character to feel unique in some way. So with that loose framework in mind, let's jump back real quick to the co-op players that we spoke about briefly. Here's an idea. Maybe it's a terrible one. That's very possible. I'm just throwing it out there, because hopefully it will get you thinking, and maybe you'll come up with an idea, probably a better one. Let's say Jimothy and Quad Bastion are co-oping through a new area when Bad Red Man Pro Ganker invades. You got 2 moves now as the host. You can resist, whether it be hiding, running, or fighting. Alternatively, you can surrender. Imagine an item that is given to all hosts, a coward's offering, if you will. When you use this item, it will, take some percentage of your souls and award the invader with the item that they get, the ear. and some souls. You're cutting off your ear and offering it to the invader, who will then leave, if they are in the covenant that seeks ears. Now obviously, this would need to be balanced in such a sense that it does demand something of the host. It isn't a completely get-out-of-jail-free card. And I'll point out, I'm not married to this idea. It's something that came to mind, but I don't know even if I like it. I'm just trying to think of ideas of how can we cater to all different types of players. Not every game needs to cater to everyone, and I'm fully on board with that. I don't think Elden Ring needs easy modes, but it is also to make the game as enjoyable to as many people as it can be without ruining the integrity of the game. It's a very fine line to tread. This idea could be ruining the integrity. I don't know. The invader gets their item, Jimothy and Quad Bastion get to keep playing in peace. But maybe it runs the risk of the invaders being like, I never get any action, people just keep giving up. Is that bad? If they get the item, are they still frustrated that they didn't get to, gank? Valid. Quite possibly that would be the case. Without actively demonstrating the mechanic, we have no way of knowing how many people would give up and how many would fight. Of course, it depends on how big the sacrifice is. In this hypothetical, what would you do as the host? Would you give up or would you fight? Would you still give up if the sacrifice was quite large? Let me know what you think. But I do have another idea that's directly tied to this one. We don't just have red invaders, we have another faction. Do you remember purples from Dark Souls 3? Think that. We have hosts and their summons. We have the red invaders who seek out ears. But we have another aggressive party, the chaos of purple. In terms of Elden Ring, you might say they are frenzied flame invaders or something like that maybe. These players are not seeking any specific items from hosts. They don't kill a host and get an ear. Rather, if they have any progression, it is tied solely to kills. When they show up in a world, they are aggressive to everyone and everything. They can attack hosts, enemies, and reds. Now again, I don't know whether it's better to have them with no progression, or if their progression is specifically tied to kills of any players. So once they show up, you don't know who they're after, the reds or the hosts. The purples can't be dissuaded with cowards' offerings because they are mad. Red invaders are there for a specific reason. Think of them as like the assassins who are there doing a job. The purples, they're just the psychopaths. So consider Jimothy and Quad Bastion have been invaded by a purple. What now? If a red shows up, they might want to keep them around. Maybe the red and the purple will deal with each other. Now, do reds get an ear if they kill a purple? Maybe. Maybe it's only from hosts, but either way, the purple, he gets to pick his target. Maybe he wants to team up with the host and kill the red. Does the purple leave once they kill any player, or does it have to be the host? See, that's a good question, because as the purple, you're mad. Maybe you want to team up with the host and get the red, or maybe you want to pretend to do that and hang around the host, then when the red shows up, you backstab the host. It opens up chaos. It opens up options. Now personally, I think more players would lean towards red than purple for the rewards and maybe less chance of being ganked, I don't know. But I could well be wrong here, because lots of people want lots of different things from PvP. Do not take these ideas as having my full endorsement. They are just ideas, and a lot of the time, when you come up with ideas, they are bad, or need a lot of refinement. And I'm throwing them out, hoping to get your creative juices flowing, as disgusting as that sounds. So, in this hypothetical situation, we have reds who invade and get items to rank up, purples who are there for chaos, and hosts. What about blues? Frankly, I think the blue system doesn't really need much touching. If you join blues, you get summoned automatically to invader players and have to defend them against reds and probably purples. I'm not really sure what else needs changing there, but if you have any ideas for how blues should be changed, well, let me know. And before I get into the next point, which I'm going to make the final one, as this video is getting really long, I just realised, there's been some other experimental ideas in these games. Dragon Covenant, which is specifically kind of for 1v1 duels. the Gravelord Covenant, things like that. Do we want more things like that, or do we want to keep it simple? And if you had to design a new multiplayer-focused Covenant, what would you want from it? What would keep you coming back to it again and again? What about, say, a Puppet Master Covenant, where you invade players as a monster in their world, which is a lot like the invasion mechanic in Resident Evil 6. But yes, moving on. Risk and reward. Now, I ran a poll asking you guys what you like most about PvP in Souls games. Chaotic invasions, structured duels, think 1v1s, arenas, like honorable duels, or just, well, to ignore it, to pull the plug, play offline. Again, this isn't indicative of the whole community, because remember, there's like 30+ million players. But most of you who took the poll prefer the chaos of invasions. About 50% of you picked that option, 25% each for the remaining options. And again, some people said it varies, like some days are like invasions, some days are like 1v1s, of course. To me, that indicates that if we do extrapolate, a good chunk of people, if not the majority, do like PvP for the unique aspects of invasions more so than going for serious 1v1 duels. But there is a part of the community who want that, and I have what I think is not a bad solution for that. Ignoring the technical aspects like balance and netcode, keep 1v1 dueling arenas more or less as they are. People will organically decide on a level range and a place to duel against each other. That's fine. The community will go, most 1v1s are going to happen in this area and in this level. But also, you can include the Dark Souls 2 style arena for 1v1s, 2v2s, and 3v3s. And these use preset characters. Do you remember the demo for Dark Souls and Dark Souls 2, where you didn't make and customize your character, you picked them from a preset. You picked Beatrice, you picked the Black Knight, you picked Solaire Restorer. Or for a more recent example, imagine you go into the arena and you pick a Night Rain character, a Nightfarer, and then you fight the other player or players. I think that would present a relatively fair sort of system that allows for ranking and, to some extent, competition, because, as mentioned, it would be balanced, because everyone is on the same playing field. And you might be thinking, well, the whole fun is in my customized character, taking them into PvP. Yes, and you can still go to the community-designated PvP duel spots. You can still invade. This is just another option, providing players with more choices. How exactly the ranking and matchmaking works isn't really too important at the moment, so there's no need to go in depth on it, but I think you probably understand the idea, right? And also, one extra thing that I would love to see in Elden Ring 2, spirit summon battles. Just as like a silly thing where you go to some sort of arena and maybe you can wager souls on basically watching a fight, not between a player, but by spirit summons, or maybe even bosses. It's Redmane Knight Ogre versus Latenna. Something like that I think would just be kind of fun. That has nothing to do with PvP, I just thought I'd quickly mention it as I was talking about arenas, as it's just something I think would be fun. Back to risk and reward though, that is a huge part of the PvP in these games. PvP needs to have stakes. That is where the adrenaline comes from. As I mentioned in my other video, one of the reasons I don't personally care for PvP these days is how tedious it is. My idea of a tense invasion is not an invader popping up, then running away, constantly swapping weapons when one doesn't work as he cycles through all his different meta options he's got prepared, running to hide behind enemies every 5 seconds. That is boring, yawning snore time. To which, how do we pressure invaders? How do we stress invaders? Time limits. Enemies are not friendly to them either. Now, I don't know if this is really feasible on a technical level, but I feel like enemies should be able to hurt invaders, but not actively treat them as hostile, if that makes sense. Some people will strongly disagree, and they think it's vital to invasions that, enemies can pair up with invaders, whatever. Likewise, people will strongly disagree about time limits. They will think, oh, well, I need a lot of time to maybe wait out and bait the host. I get that reasoning, but I also think, again, it is a direct counter to what an invasion should be. It's an invasion, not a standoff. You may disagree with that, and you are entitled to do so. That's my personal take on how invasions should be. They should be quick, violent, and very tense. Not a slog, not an endurance test or a patience test. It isn't just the invaders that need to be stressed, though. Hosts, obviously, should be stressed too. Generally, I'm of the opinion that invaders should stand to lose more, but also gain more from invasions. That makes a lot of sense to me. Hosts, though, well, I suppose to some extent being invaded is stress enough, you might say. But whilst there is a time limit for invaders, so hosts may just want to hide, wait them out, we do need to balance it so there is a reasonable risk and danger for them. What can we add to that? What can we implement that ensures that? Well, I'm not sure, really. Do we make it so enemies are powered up? Do we make it so that the enemies actively move toward the player, or the invader gets a stacking buff, or is able to gradually locate the host? I don't know. That said, I do think that invasions should be able to happen pretty much all the time, whether you're hosting players or not, unless you're at a designated safe area. I think invaders should be able to, well, penetrate your world. Obviously not if you're offline, that would be alarming. But say you're playing solo and you get invaded. You fend them off with a coward's offering, you have a cooldown before you can be invaded again. You die, you get a bigger cooldown. You win, a shorter cooldown. And of course we can have an item like the dried finger or whatever that gets rid of the cooldown. If you have other players with you, the cooldown is also cut down considerably. That's also how I think we can deal with ganks, to some extent. We need to scale multiplayer depending on the number of players. By yourself, you can be invaded by one person, whether red or purple. Have a summon, you can be invaded by 2 people, a red and a purple. Have 2 summons, you can be invaded by 3 people, 2 reds at most and a purple. You might think that's kind of like how Dark Souls 3 does it, and yeah, kinda. So what happens if you get invaded by a red and a purple at the same time? You can offer up the coward's item to expel the red, leaving you with just 1 purple. So what happens if you're invaded by 2 reds and a purple? Could you still use it? Would you have to sacrifice twice as much to get them out? And whilst it would trigger the cooldown for reds, what about for purples? It's a lot to think about, and there's a lot of technical things like that would need to be sorted out, a lot of overlapping systems. Maybe this solution sucks without seeing it in practice. I have no idea. But I know what the problems are. PvP lacks tension these days, and you might completely disagree with that. You might be someone who started with Elden Ring, and you find invasions really tense. They all get your blood pumping, your adrenaline flowing. But for me, it lacks risk, it lacks rewards that are commensurate to the time spent. A lot of times I'm invaded, and either it's a very quick setback and it didn't mean anything other than a 20-second run back to where I was, or it drags out for like 30 minutes and becomes tedious in that way. Plenty of people enjoy the invasions in this game, and a dedicated part of the community take the 1v1 dueling aspects extremely seriously too, to the extent they will send you death threats, whether they beat you, whether you beat them, or if you dare to criticize their hobby. But considering these are all parts of the game, they should be catered for to some extent, and that is largely what I'm saying. PvP is a quite popular part of these games. FromSoft should take the time and the budget to invest in it and improve it. That's really all I want at the end of the day, and I do not believe that is a controversial opinion to have. I don't care for invasions these days, but yeah, I do kind of miss the fun I had with it back in the day. I would like to see PvP develop to a point where I actively want to do invasions again, where I feel really excited when they happen, and that can occur. These things can happen, after all. Back when Dark Souls 3 came out, I played it, I beat it twice, and I developed extreme Souls fatigue. I wanted like nothing to do with the franchise at that point, as it felt so samey. But Elden Ring came out, and they managed to hook me again. And I hope they can do that with PvP. I'm convinced they can if they actually allocate some time and resources to it. Anyway, this video ended up being a lot longer than I intended it to be, but anyway, thank you so much for watching. Feel free to share your thoughts down in the comments, and I will catch you next time. Ciao.